Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. Once again, my name is Hari-kirtana. It's so nice to see you. A pleasure for me to be here with you and an honor to have you here with me. And if you would do me the honor of raising your hand in order to confirm that I can be heard. There we go. Thank you very much. It is very nice to know that that is working. All right. Let's go through our usual bit of housekeeping. For those of you who are new to the Satsang, you can adjust your audio settings and your viewing options up in the upper right-hand corner. You need not worry about your microphone or video camera because you can see and hear me, or if you're just listening, you can only hear me. But you have the option to see me. I cannot see or hear you, but if you would like to make yourself heard, you can pop a question or a comment into either the Q&A box or the chat, which I now have access to by virtue of having a second monitor. So pick your choose. Whatever works for you is going to work for me. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, our last class, we are exploring chapter 11, the Yoga of Divine Revelation. Last week, we looked at the outcome of the Battle of Kurukshetra, forecast by Krishna in his revelation of his universal form to Arjuna. We spoke about fear of God as impetus for spiritual curiosity, as opposed to impetus for turning tail and running away. We covered verses 26 through 31, and this is now leading up to what many people consider to be the crescendo of the Bhagavad Gita, the big reveal of Krishna as God. Well, you know, it is actually a pretty big reveal, but it's not for one who is engaged in the pursuit of bhakti or devotion, the actual crescendo. That happened back in the 10th chapter. And we discussed why this is so when we covered those verses in the 10th chapter. This is, however, an extremely dramatic moment in the Bhagavad Gita, wherein Krishna tells Arjuna about this particular form and what his mission is. We will review Arjuna's inquiry about this. So we'll talk about time, the dark side of God. There are 5 topics covered in the Bhagavad Gita: the individual self, the universal self, the material nature, karma, and time. So here, Krishna will specifically reveal himself as time in the material world. We'll talk a little bit about becoming an instrument of divine will, which is what Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to choose to become. And we'll also talk about the idea of altruistic evil, war and violence in the name of religion. This is one of the other reasons why this particular portion of the Gita is so dramatic, and also why it is controversial. So we'll cover just 3 verses this evening, 32, 33, and 34, as we take a very close look at this very dramatic moment in the Bhagavad Gita. As is our regular observance, we will chant this invocation mantra, this Vishnu mantra. So for those of you who are new to transliterated Sanskrit, the dot over the M in Om indicates that we close the back of our tongue up against the back of the roof of our mouth. At the same time, we bring our lips together in front. The bars across the A's and the last word indicate a long elongated and open version of ah, as opposed to a short and truncated version of the other of the two a sounds when there's no bar. So I will chant, you can chant back. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Translation. I offer my respects to the Supreme Person, the Son of Vasudeva, who is the all-pervading transcendence. So this mantra is both a Vishnu mantra indicated by the all-pervading transcendence, and also a Krishna mantra indicated by the patronymic Vasudevaya, the son of Vasudeva, who is Krishna. Last week, we finished with this request from Arjuna in verse 31. O Lord of Lords, so fierce of form, please tell me who you are. I bow down before you. Please be merciful to me. O primal Lord, I want to understand you, for I do not know what your mission is. So here, fear of God as impetus for spiritual curiosity, the desire to understand who Krishna is, and specifically, what is the story behind this particular overwhelming and awe-inspiring and fearsome form that Krishna has shown to Arjuna. Whoops. So our translation and commentary will actually be verses 32, 33, and 34. Don't believe everything you see. But first, let's check out beautiful Krishna. So this is Krishna as a youth in this particular image, in his rural environment, the forests of Vrindavan, with his friend, the peacock, whose dropped feathers Krishna puts in his headdress. He's holding his flute. When he plays, he makes the most beautiful, attractive music. All of anyone who hears it is stunned by the sound of Krishna's music when he plays his flute. They're stunned by his beauty. Krishna is just unbelievably good looking. Even the demons who come to Vrindavan to try to kill Krishna, as they approach Krishna, they hesitate and they just think, wow, this kid is amazingly beautiful. And as a youth, he continues to be just spectacularly handsome. And why not? He's the supreme person. He's going to be the source of all beauty and therefore radiating all beauty beyond compare. So I just wanted to check in and have us check out beautiful Krishna juxtaposed with the form that we are looking at in this chapter that Krishna is revealing to Arjuna, and by extension, revealing to us. Now here is that same beautiful boy a few years later. He has come with his brother Balaram, which you can see in the lower left with a very alabaster complexion, to a wrestling match that he was invited to attend by his uncle, Kamsa. Kamsa is the gentleman who's about to get pummeled by Krishna. Even though Kamsa is Krishna's uncle, Krishna is about to kill him because he's evil. Kamsa is the one who kept sending the demons to Vrindavan to try to kill Krishna. The little bit of a backstory for this is that Kamsa heard a prophecy that the 8th child of his sister would kill him. And so he did everything he could to try to prevent this, even going so far as threatening to kill his sister before she had a chance to have any children. He failed miserably. And in the end, Kamsa meets his demise at the hands of his nephew. Now, here's an interesting thing about this. When Krishna entered the wrestling arena, he came to town. He left Vrindavan with an entourage, came to the big city of Mathura, and entered this wrestling arena. And when he walked in, he appeared differently, or that is, he was perceived differently according to people's different relationships with him. In a previous class, we spoke about rasas, or flavors of relationship. So according to the particular flavor of the relationship that people had with Krishna, they would see him in these different ways. So Krishna and his brother Balaram and his entourage, they showed up beautifully dressed. Krishna and Balaram were very attractive to all the people who were assembled there. The name Krishna means all attractive. And they were dressed as if they were going to be actors on a stage. They dressed in such ways to draw everyone's attention to them. And to the people in general, Krishna appeared to be the most beautiful person. To the wrestlers whom he would face in the arena before he gets to Kamsa, he appeared just like a thunderbolt, which is the most powerful of weapons. To all the women and girls, he appeared to be the most attractive young man, like Cupid personified, just unbelievably handsome and beautiful and cute. To Krishna's parents, who were also there, he appeared like the most loving child. Krishna was a very loving child. To all of the cowherd men who accompanied Krishna from Vrindavan, they looked at him and saw one of their own kinsmen, one of their own tribe. To the people who were not so bright, he appeared incompetent. To the yogis who were present, Krishna appeared as the super soul, that is to say, their object of meditation, the Paramatma within the heart. To the other members of the same dynasty within which Krishna had originally appeared, he appeared like there to be the most celebrated descendant. To the evil kings and princes, Kamsa's allies, they saw him as the most powerful ruler and the one destined to chastise them for their evil ways. And to Kamsa himself, Krishna appeared to be death personified. And sure enough, for Kamsa, that is precisely what Krishna turned out to be. Boom. This is a photograph of the first test of an atomic bomb from July of 1945. And when the father of the atomic bomb, the head of the Manhattan Project program for the development of this bomb, J. Robert Oppenheimer, saw this initial test, the detonation of the very first atomic bomb, he, as a student of the Upanishads, recalled the verse that we are about to look at in the Bhagavad Gita, the translation that he is credited with quoting goes, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. So the word he translated as death literally means world-destroying time. So when Oppenheimer saw this revolutionary weapon, what he saw was something that would change the world, that was capable of destroying the world, which must be a pretty heavy thing to be the guy who heads up the project that develops a kind of weapon that can destroy the world. So in this way, Oppenheimer actually made the Bhagavad Gita a little more famous on account of his knowledge of it and his quotation, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." So here we have these two different forms of the Supreme Person. One is this beautiful boy, this beautiful young man who calls to all of us with the amazing and wonderful music of his flute, who wants to engage in a relationship with us, who invites us to engage in a relationship of love, an exchange of love. And then on the other side, we see this other form, the dark side, the horrific form of death, as everyone in the material world is being consumed, flying like moths into a flame, into the flaming mouths of the universal form. So this is the difference between spiritual consciousness and material consciousness. That is to say, these are the outcomes. Our gradual elevation in spiritual consciousness brings us into a relationship of eternal spiritual love with the Supreme Person, whereas material consciousness keeps us essentially in what is a prison of the material world. And from the highest birth one can take to the lowest, one still experiences the misery of repeated birth and death. So, those are our choices. Therefore, one who understands the situation of the material world and is a little bit thoughtful is going to ask the question of why am I here? What is my purpose in being here? Perhaps how can I get out of here? Or how can I move through this from the proper situation? And if one comes to the conclusion that there must be a Supreme Person involved in the equation somewhere, somehow, then the question arises, well, which relationship do I want to have with the Supreme Person? One of eternal love and infinite beauty, or the pursuit of ephemeral desires that will always end in death? Which brings us to our 3 verses for this evening. So we're going to go, because we're only covering 3 verses tonight, rather than go through them and then come back, we'll just go through each of these verses, starting with verse 32. So here, Krishna will answer or reply to Arjuna's query, fulfilling his request to understand what it is he is seeing. So another quick review of diacritics, the markings that indicate the pronunciation cues. The accent mark over an S indicates an SH sound made towards the back of one's mouth that sounds a little more like pink noise, as opposed to a regular SH sound from behind our teeth, white noise, SH sound. So this will be a sound. The R, you will flick your tongue off of the cliff behind the ridge behind your teeth. So it's not an sound, but a R sound. The bars over the vowels, I have already explained. The apostrophe in front of a vowel indicates in front of a consonant rather, indicates a dropped vowel, and therefore the two words on either side of the apostrophe become combined into a single word. A dot under an S indicates a regular SH sound. A dot under an R indicates an R sound where you curl your tongue back towards the roof of your mouth about 2/3 of the way back. We've got a couple of those. We pronounce every letter in transliterated Sanskrit. So, for example, if there are two Ds, you hit the first D, slam on the brakes, and then move forward on the second D. The same thing will be true with Ts. A dot under an H at the end of a word, at the end of a line, will indicate that the vowel that precedes that H is echoed back. And I think that has us covered. So I'm going to chant each line, one line at a time. You chant each line back after I chant it. Here we go. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Kalosmi Loka Krayakrit Pravriddho Lokan Samahartum Iha Pravrittaha Tritepi Tamna Bhavishyanti Sarve Evastitha Pratyanikeshu Yodaha That was so much fun. I think we should do it again. Just a quick note, even if there is a long vowel before the H with a dot under it at the end, a short version of that vowel is what gets echoed back. So one more time, here we go. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. I neglected to say that the C is always a CH sound. If you want a K sound, you get a K, an S sound, you get an S. C is always CH. So, taking it from the top. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Kalosmi Loka Krayakrit Pravriddho Lokan Samahartum Iha Pravrittaha Rite Pithamna Bhavishyanti Sarve Evastitha Pratyani Keshu Yodaha Translation. The Blessed Lord said, I am time, the great destroyer of worlds, and I come to consume all. Even if you do nothing, all the warriors arrayed in opposition here will be slain. Pretty heavy stuff. Let's unpack this a little bit. Krishna's mission is to destroy everyone, at least in this form. His mission is to destroy everyone. He is time. So in this particular situation, Arjuna finds himself on a battlefield. Up to this point, political ambitions and intrigues have led to war, and now it's unavoidable, and everyone except for Arjuna, his brothers, and a few others on both sides will die. Now, you may recall that Arjuna was very anxious about being the cause of the deaths of people on the battlefield. Well, Krishna has given a very, very clear answer to this concern. On a battlefield, each side is thinking, I'm going to win. My side is going to win. And then the other side says, my side is going to win. And in modern times, we see that others outside of the conflict say, hey, we should stop this conflict. We should end this war. In fact, not just this one, we should end wars, period. So what Krishna is saying is that things have been put into motion you cannot stop. And that's just all there is to it. Now, you may not believe it. In fact, it's entirely likely that even though you and I both understand intellectually that our time here is limited, still there's an element of disbelief. You may have heard the proposition, well, you know, if you believe that it's true, then it is true for you. Relative truth. Time does not care if you believe in it or not. There's no question of belief or disbelief. Believe it or not, death is coming. And the most unbelievable thing is that when death comes, we can't believe it. Have you ever heard anyone say this? So-and-so died. I can't believe it. Maybe you or I have said this at some point in our lives. We hear, so-and-so has died. I can't believe it. I remember in my yoga classes, on several occasions, when noted celebrities that were very dear to the students who were coming to my class suddenly and unexpectedly passed, I heard people say, I can't believe it. Well, why not? For one who is born, death is certain. And for all who die, birth is also certain. This is Krishna's advice to Arjuna all the way back in the second chapter, the 27th verse. And therefore, Krishna says, you should not lament for that which is inevitable. So Krishna has actually kind of foreshadowed what he's telling Arjuna here all the way back 9 chapters ago. But there's a caveat here. The body dies. The person does not die. The body dies. That's inevitable. But the soul is eternal. Therefore, no one can kill or cause a person to be killed. So here's an excerpt from a commentary from Bhagavad Gita as it is. This is A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami's commentary on this verse. Here, Krishna presents himself in that form of all-devouring time. Except for a few Pandavas, everyone who was present on the battlefield would be devoured by him. Arjuna was not in favor of the fight, and he thought it was better not to fight. Then there would be no frustration. In reply, the Lord is saying that even if he did not fight, every one of them would be destroyed, for that was his plan. If Arjuna stopped fighting, they would die one way or another. Death cannot be checked. So even if he did not fight, it would not matter, because in fact they were already dead. Time destroys everything. Everything goes away in due course of time. Therefore, who can say, I am more powerful than time? Time is the form of the Supreme Person seen by those who are absorbed in material consciousness, who think this material world is the all in all. This life is the only life there is. Eat, drink, and be merry. You only live once, etc. But for such people, if we think about the ontological proof for the existence of God, God is that which is greater than anything or any being that you can imagine. Well, for the materialist, time is God. Time is supreme. And it's not just people who are destroyed by time. Entire empires are destroyed by time. Think of how many empires have come and gone: the Egyptian Empire, the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, the Dutch Empire, the Portuguese Empire, the Spanish Empire, the British Empire. And if you go to these places, you don't really have anything other than the faintest of hints from historical places or documents or such of what their past glory was. And now, for the moment at least, we have the American empire. Our armed forces are all over the world. We're fighting with everybody all the time, trying to keep control of this, that, or the other of our what we call American interests, which are usually business interests, because the business of America is business. And the American empire, in due course of time, will be reduced to the same kind of insignificance as every empire that went before. In fact, I don't personally think it's going to take very long, because if you have to make America great again, then it's probably already too late, and you're already on the downward side of that slope. Anything that is new will become old. One of my friends just got a new car, a new Tesla, and she was kind enough to let me sit in the driver's seat and kind of check it out. And it's so new, I don't even know if I could ever like get used to a car like this, because there's nothing on the dashboard. It's just all, it's a computer on wheels. And it's just like a screen, like a giant pad. I don't know, some of you may have driven these or have one of these. I found it really disorienting, even though the ride was really smooth. It's beautiful. Also, the design is gorgeous. It's bright red, and the color is beautiful. The lines are beautiful. It's really also just art on wheels. And in 30 years, it's going to be a piece of junk, because that's the nature of cars, to become a piece of junk in 30 years or less. A beautiful body today becomes ashes or earth or the excrement of insects and vultures, depending on how it is disposed, or if it is disposed at all. The vultures would certainly prefer that it not be disposed, that they will take care of its disposition. We tend to be greatly concerned with preventing the deaths of others. That's one of our causes for spiritual activism, or any kind of even material activism. We are trying to stop things that ultimately would result in death. We don't like death. We want to stop death. Therefore, we oppose those things that are life-threatening. It is easier for us to think about preventing other people's deaths than it is to think about the inevitability of our own death. It's a real buzzkill. If we are conscious of this fact, then it's really hard to have a good time. Krishna is speaking the Gita to remind us that this is actually something that we should be thinking about. It's just like a final exam. If you keep putting off studying for your final exam, you might flunk your final exam. We know it's coming, and yet we don't really spend a lot of time preparing for it. So this is a kind of willful ignorance, or avidya, ignorance of death, but that is willful. And in its place, we engage in the illusion of control, which is asmita, egoism. So these are the first two obstacles or afflictions that Patanjali lists in his Yoga Sutras. Obstacles to yoga: avidya, ignorance, and asmita, egoism. So the ignorance in this case is the willful ignorance of the inevitability of death, And the illusion of control is the egoism. If you have any questions about or comments about anything that I've offered so far on this verse, please go ahead and pop them either in the chat or in the Q&A. I'll be happy to field any questions or respond to any comments that you have. So let's go back to the verse and take a closer look at some of the key words here. In the third line that Krishna speaks, we see rite pi tvam. So there's an A in front of the P that was dropped by the apostrophe, indicated by the apostrophe in order to fit the right number of syllables into this line. So rite api tvam, which means, actually has two meanings. So the first meaning is without you, or I'm sorry, except for you. So here's the exception. Rite pi tvam, except for you, Arjuna and the Pandavas. Everyone on the battlefield is going to die. So that's the first meaning. But the second meaning is without you. In other words, with or without your participation, they're going to die. You are not the doer. You are not in control of this situation. I, in my form of time, am in control of this situation. So back in the third chapter, in the 27th verse, Krishna tells Arjuna that one who is bewildered by the influence of the false ego thinks, I am the doer. I am the one who is making things happen. I am in control. And in actuality, all activities are being carried out by an interaction of the three qualities of material nature, which is collectively Krishna's external or separated energy that operates under his control. Just like if you push the on button in a Tesla, then all kinds of things happen by remote succession. It's like pushing, it's like dominoes. You don't actively put the screen on or put the engine in gear or make the seat move or what have you. These are kind of automatically done as soon as you put them in motion. So similarly, the material energy is put in motion, and then after that, automatically things happen. So it's not like Krishna is micromanaging his material energy, but rather he puts things in motion, and time is the element that moves the material world. Without time, nothing moves, nothing happens. There's no sequence of events in the material world. So by virtue of time, events are set in motion, and in this way, Krishna is actually the controller of the material energy. So the message here is this. You can act as an instrument of divine will and take credit, or you can walk away and live in disgrace. Either way, everyone else on the battlefield is going to die because that has already been set in motion and you can't stop that. Which brings us to our next verse. So these will just look at the English translation. This is now verse 33. Krishna continues, therefore, you should rise up, attain glory in the conquest of your enemies, and enjoy a flourishing kingdom. All these men have already been slain by me alone. You, O masterful archer, can be but an instrument. And then verse 34, I have already slain Drona and Bhishma, as well as Jayadrath and Karna, and the other great warriors. Therefore, do not hesitate. Simply fight, and you will surely conquer your enemies in battle. So this assurance that when one fights with the sanction of God, engages in warfare, violence, for the sake of being an instrument of God's will, just scares the hell out of us, and for very good reason. So let's take a look at this for a moment. This is a quote from Blaise Pascal, the French mathematician, physicist, inventor, writer, and Catholic theologian from a few hundred years back. Renaissance man, if ever there was one. Men never do evil so completely and cheerfully as when they do it from religious conviction. Unfortunately, I think there's some truth to this, which brings us to this interesting phrase that I picked up from a book that I've been reading called Not in God's Name. I trust it's reading the right way to you, because to me it looks backwards. He's a rabbi, so perhaps if you read it backwards, it'll just be evocative of Hebrew. Either way, this is by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. Hey, do me a favor, somebody in the chat, tell me if this appears to you to be reading in the correct direction. I'm just curious, because to me it looks backwards in my monitor. Anyway, the book is called Not in God's Name, Confronting Religious Violence by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. And yes, it's correct. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Very reassuring. Once again, not believing everything I see. Anyway, I found this quote at the beginning of Rabbi Sacks's book, and I'm going to take a moment to share some of his book with you. He begins at the beginning, not so surprisingly, that is to say, Genesis. The book of Genesis tells us, having made human beings in his image, God sees the first man and woman disobey the first command, and the first human child commit the first murder. Within a short space of time, quote, the world was filled with violence, end quote. God, quote, saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, unquote. We then read one of the most searing sentences in religious literature, quote, God regretted that he had made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. That's Genesis 6:6. I do not think that the Bhagavad Gita offers us a one-to-one comparison here, which is to say, for one thing, Krishna has not offered up any commandments in the Bhagavad Gita, nor will he for its duration. And what we find in the Gita is not regret on the part of the Supreme Person, but rather compassion on the part of the Supreme Person for human beings and, in fact, all beings. I'm going to read just a little bit more, but I want to explain about this particular interesting phrase that Rabbi Sacks coins in his book that I used in forecasting what we were going to talk about tonight, and that is altruistic evil. So altruistic evil is a term that Rabbi Sacks came up with in order to describe what he calls the deadly phenomenon of ordinary, relatively sane people, not psychopathic people, becoming cold-blooded murderers of school children, aid workers, journalists, and people at prayer. In other words, how is it that people become psychopathic? Altruistic evil, he defines as that evil that is committed in a sacred cause in the name of high ideals. It appears to me to be a kind of insanity. So I'm going to share just a little bit more of this book. I'm in the process of reading it. I haven't read the whole thing. Here, by the way, is another really good book I highly recommend. All right. So this again is from Not in God's Name by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. Consider theology again. Monotheism is not an easy faith. Recall the verse from Isaiah. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil, end quote. How can God, who is all good, create evil? We have played with this conundrum previously. That is the question of questions for the monotheistic mind. Abraham asked, quote, shall the judge of all the earth not do justice? Moses asked, why have you done evil to this people? The simplest answer is that the bad God does is a response to the bad we do. It is justice, punishment, retribution. That is how Jews coped with the crisis of defeat and exile, thinking, because of our sins, we were exiled from our land. The Hebrew Bible is the supreme example of that rarest of phenomena, a national literature of self-criticism. Try looking for one of those in America. And try running for high office in American politics on a platform of that kind of introspection. Continuing, other ancient civilizations recorded their victories. The Israelites recorded their failures. It is what the Mosaic and prophetic books are about. I think that there's a valuable lesson in this, insofar as, on the one hand, we don't want to get down on ourselves in an egotistic way of false humility or low self-esteem by just beating ourselves up on account of all of our mistakes and what a loser we are and such like that. On the other hand, genuine humility and thoughtfulness bring us to the conclusion that whatever our situation is, if we accept the idea of karma, of a reaction to our actions, then we put ourselves here rather than having been put here by some force arbitrarily that we had no involvement with. One more paragraph that I will share with you. But it is not easy to see God as the source of bad as well as good, judgment as well as forgiveness, justice as well as love. The rabbis did this by understanding the two primary names of God in the Bible, Elohim and Hashem, as referring respectively to God as justice and God as compassion. Niels Bohr, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist, said that he came to his theory of complementarity when his son stole something from a local shop. I think this is a really good example of what we're dealing with here. He found himself thinking of his son as a father, and he found himself thinking of his son as a father would do, then as a judge would do, and realized that while he had to think both ways, he could not do both simultaneously. He had to switch from one to the other. That is what monotheism asks of its followers, to think of God as both a father and a judge. A judge punishes, a parent forgives. A judge enforces the law, a parent embodies love. God is both, but it is hard to think of both at the same time. And therefore, we have the reconciliation of these two different aspects of the Supreme Person in the form of Krishna, the lovable, beautiful youth, and the Vishvarupa, the form of time, the ultimate destroyer of everything. So these two forms are both the Supreme Being, and it's really hard to think of them both at the same time and being the same person. And yet, here we see a perfectly logical example of how that would be, of how one in a regular experience of dealing with misbehaving children, a parent would have to manifest both as a judge and dispenser of justice and as a compassionate reservoir of love. So the Bhagavad Gita is presenting us with a monotheistic kind of yoga. And because monotheism requires the resolution of duality, we find that we have a Supreme Person who has two sides, a light side and a dark side, Yoda and Darth Vader. Let's go back and look at verse 32 one more time. Take a look at the very last word, all the way at the end of the verse, Yodaha. Curious, don't you think? What does this word mean? Yodaha, the soldiers, knights, Jedi, knight. Let's take a look again. The word that precedes Yodaha, pratyanikeshu, pratyanikeshu, long I. Pratyanikeshu is also a word for soldiers, but soldiers on the opposite sides. So who is the soldier on the opposite side of Yoda? Darth Vader. Before he was Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker. Now you have an opportunity to win your local Star Wars trivia contest. You're welcome. Tonight's class, we covered time, the dark side of God, or the material world, as the dark side of the Force, the dark energy of the Supreme Person. We spoke about becoming an instrument of divine will, surrendering one's ego and thinking that we are the controller, and instead allowing oneself to be an instrument for a higher purpose. And then we explored a little bit about the implications of altruistic evil, or war and violence in the name of religion, and how to understand that it is not God that is being evil by allowing such things to happen, how God can be at the same time both all-attractive reservoir of love and the dispenser of death in the form of time. Any questions about this very dramatic and pivotal verse in the Bhagavad Gita? Oh, Jill, you're very welcome. I'm always very, very happy to see you here and to offer you hopefully something of value. Thank you very much. All right. While I await your questions, I'd like to remind you, just in case you forgot, If you missed my online workshop yesterday, Sanskrit Made Simple for Yoga Teachers, do not despair. There is still time. You can check out the replay up until Sunday at midnight for about the next 4 days. You can still register and then watch the replay. So please, if you are interested in what turned out to be 70 minutes worth of Sanskrit tutelage, please go to Sanskrit-made-simple-for-yoga-teachers or Sanskrit Made Simple for Yoga Teachers on my website, Hari-kirtan.com/Sanskrit Made Simple for Yoga Teachers. You can register, and as soon as you register, you'll be taken right to a page where you can download my free gift to you, my Sanskrit pronunciation guide, and immediately click on the link to see the replay. So please do it. Check it out. If you are watching this after the fact, or if you think of a question down the road about our class tonight, please send it to me at Hari-kirtana.com. Susan, you are very welcome. It is my pleasure. Next week, we're going to talk about the role of prayer in yoga. Normally, we associate prayer with religion. And as we are about to see in this ultimate book of yoga, the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is about to offer prayers. So we're going to talk about how we reconcile the idea that yoga is not a religion, and yet at the same time, prayer has a place in our yoga practice. So that's what we're going to look at. We're also going to find out what Arjuna is really afraid of. Remember, he's seeing this universal form and his knees are knocking. He's quaking with fear. And he's going to reveal in the course of offering his prayers what it is he's actually afraid of when he sees this universal form. We will cover a larger cluster of verses next time, 35 through 42. And that's it. Last call for questions. Got anything? All right. Thank you all very, very much for spending your time with me this evening, or whenever it is you are spending your time with me. It is always a great pleasure for me to spend this time with you, and always a great honor to know you have spent some of your time with me. Thank you very, very much for your enthusiastic participation, and I will call it a night. All right. Thanks very much.